Hello everyone, my name is the Jurassic Insider, and welcome back to a very special episode of Jurassic World, the game, a very different one compared to what we're normally doing. We're not going to be doing anything of the normal stuff like battles and evolving creatures and whatnot, because today I have something very exciting planned that is going to be a bit different, like I just said, and hopefully you guys will enjoy it. But today's video, we are going to be ranking every single common creature in Jurassic World, the game, every single Jurassic common that there is, all 15 of them, from worst to best. Now, you might be very confused about why I'm doing this, because of course, all you have to do to find out which creatures are the best is just sort them by rarity and then find out which one is the strongest. So what's the point of me making a video showing you guys which one's the strongest? Well, that's the exact thing. That's not what this video is. Instead, this video is not a look at which creatures are technically the strongest, but rather which common creatures I personally think, in a variety of factors, are technically the best. At least, again, in my own opinion. So the factors I'm going to be considering is not just the strength, although the strength will play a part into this ranking. The DNA cost plays a small part in the ranking. But the biggest thing is just the availability. How available is it? What's its usability? Does it have any other useful statistics or information outside of just its actual stats? For example, if a creature has a hybrid, that can place it a lot higher on the list depending on how good that hybrid is or how accessible the hybrid is. So that is exactly why this video exists. Of course, this is just my own opinion. If you have any differences, make sure to leave them in the comments. I'll read them and I'll respond to them and tell you what I think. But of course, again, like, this is just based off my own personal experience. And there's a chance that you might have different opinions based on what your experiences in the game have been and your affection towards certain creatures in the game, depending on how much they helped you out in the early game. Again, this is all early game stuff. We are very late into the series of Jurassic World, the game. But either way, I do hope you guys enjoy this. So let's go ahead and get started with the list. So coming in at the bottom of the list is likely not going to be a shock to you. That is the Tajungasaurus. This is, of course, widely infamous for being quite possibly, quite literally even, the weakest creature in the entire game. It boasts the stats of 235 health and 73 attack, which is the worst in the entire game, of course, which is quite unfortunate, because, you know, Tajungasaurus is not that bad. It's got a pretty interesting model, but at the end of the day, this is the one that is going to go at the bottom of the list, at least for me. I just find it to be the least interesting. I just find it to be the one that is the least useful in the park, and in general, it's hard to get past its mediocre stats for anything else. Now, the one benefit and the one possible explanation for why this creature could be higher on somebody's list is that, of course, if you play this game a lot, you likely use the Tajungasaurus a lot because it is the weakest creature in the game. Whenever you select creatures from an ascending order and see which one's the weakest, this one's always going to be there, so you can always pick this one as a quick and easy option if you're trying to shield your attacks. And I do see that as a plausible reason. In fact, I've done that so many times throughout the series. However, that's not really something unique to Tajungasaurus when you really think about it. When you think about it, at the end of the day, Tajungasaurus is going to be considered the weakest creature, and you can technically do that meat shield idea and concept with any other creature in the game. It's not unique to Tajungasaurus, it's just we use Tajungasaurus the most often in this community. So personally, I didn't really use that as a reasoning to place this any higher, and either way, I don't think the stats are really going to put it higher. I don't ever use this creature even maxed out. I guess it is cool, and it's got a decent design, you know, it's just a tiny stegosaur. But at the end of the day, it just does not compare for that exact reason. Just barely edging out the Tajungasaurus, the second to last spot on the list is the Bonitosaura. The Bonitosaura is a quite docile big sauropod, and I do have lots of sympathy for it because it is a very, very beautiful looking dinosaur, although the face is a bit on the distracting, ugly side, possibly. However, I do like the colors on the final design, and I've always had a soft spot for Bonita. However, it's hard to deny that this creature is useful for much just because of how weak it is, and it's not even like Tajungasaurus where you use it for a meat shield. Overall, though, I do put it higher, again, for the same reason. You can't put Tajungasaurus much higher, at least in my opinion, just because it is a meat shield. So that just makes Bonitosaurus slightly better, in my opinion. It's maybe 10 DNA extra that you have to spend to get it. However, that's not really that big of a deal for a dinosaur that does have a lot more health at 263 health and 67 attack, which is slightly less than Tajungasaurus. But overall, its stats are slightly better, so that is why it is slightly higher on the list. Moving on to the next spot here, we have the first pterosaur on the list, the Colobrinchus. Now, the Colobrinchus is kind of a tough one for me, because I simultaneously do really like it, but I also don't think it's the best as it could have possibly been. The biggest problem with Colobrinchus that didn't exist in the previous updates of Jurassic World the game is that Colobrinchus is not unlockable. Now, there are 3 commons that are not unlockable from either battle stages or events, and this is one of them. I believe it is this. Tajungasaurus and Pelicanimimus are not unlockable through any type of event or battle. And Colobrinchus really does suffer from this ideology, especially since the hybrid isn't particularly amazing. It has what's probably widely considered the weakest hybrid out of all the common hybrids, which is the Limnobrinchus, and that one is not the best in the entire world. However, Colobrinchus is still decently good. It does have good enough stats, 238 health and 91 attack, meaning it is slightly more on the sweeper side, but when there's just better options out there, and you'll see one of those options, 2 of those options even, much higher on the list, that are just much better at what they're trying to accomplish than this one creature is. So ultimately, it gets a little bit low on the list. The design is alright. I do like the Colobrinchus design. It is a bit similar to some of the other ones, even within this very list, so I'm not super impressed by anything with this creature. It's okay. I don't mind it. I use it sometimes, but it's definitely not the best. Alright, next up, we got kind of a weird choice, Limnosceles. This one is probably going to be a lot higher on a lot of people's lists, which I do understand. It's the first amphibian that you actually unlock and get in the game, and I do actually have 2 of these guys just because I wanted to get some more common hybrids for missions. It's very cheap. It's very solid. The stats are not the best. 266 health, 68 attack, obviously not the best. But you'll notice across this video, I really don't put the stats into as much consideration as I do with a lot of other types and classes and rarities of creatures, just because they are just so similar, because the common class is so glued together because they're so much on the weaker side of the spectrum in terms of creatures in this game that it really doesn't make that much of a difference. However, I will admit Limnosceles still doesn't have the best stats. However, it is solid, and it still is very similar to other creatures that I put much higher on the list. So what keeps this guy down? And this might seem like a strange choice, but honestly, it's the design. I've never really liked the design of Limnosceles. I've always found the skin to be very ugly, textured, and his face always a bit distracting once again with how odd and strange it looks. And I get that is some of the appeal, you know, this is accurate at the very least, I'm assuming. However, the level 40 design, again, doesn't really do anything to evolve that. It just kind of makes it seem like more of a mess. I've just never really loved the colors. I've never loved the design and the shaping, so that's ultimately what puts it a bit lower on the list. I know it's not something that's going to bother a lot of other people. However, for me, this is my own list, and I want to make it seem, again, I don't want to just do from weakest to strongest, since that's a bit boring. So this is personally why I've kept Limnosceles a lot lower on the list. Here's another one, Guanlong, and I'm actually very, very conflicted on this one. I didn't exactly know where to put Guanlong, so again, let me know where you would put it on your own list. But for me personally, I don't love Guanlong. It was actually the final common creature that I got maxed out very late into the series, around episode 200-ish. Just because it's not really that useful in my opinion. It's in a weird spot with the carnivores where Majungasaurus is the first carnivore you get. You use it a lot. You have to evolve it to level 30. So you already have that. And then you get Utahraptor from the event. And that creature is a lot more useful for other reasons. So Guanlong has always just been kind of a weird creature. You get it early on. It's not too expensive, but it's just not the most interesting. I've also liked the original design. However, I'm not a huge fan of the max design. Again, it's alright, but it's got very boring, bland colors, so I don't really love it all that much. It's not my favorite at the very least. I don't know, it just has, when there's so many better options, I just never go for Guanlong. It's pretty forgettable in my opinion, which is unfortunate because it's not that bad. And it might have been my own personal experience. Maybe I just didn't get a lot of Guanlongs throughout my history of playing this game. But for one reason or another, I just never really evolved this guy. And to this day, I just find it to be a pretty forgettable common creature, even among many of them being quite forgettable in the grand scheme of the game. Kicking off our top 10 is Elanqua. Now, Elanqua is very similar to Limnosceles. It's an early creature that you get technically the first pterosaur you unlock at the very least, and it has 217 health and 83 attack, which does put it as one of the weakest creatures in the game. It is very close to Jungosaurus and Boninosaur in that respect. However, this creature is definitely a step up in terms of those two, in terms of stats. It is also way more accessible. Like I mentioned, the DNA cost is actually even lower if you're interested. And the one thing that puts this creature above Limnosceles, which definitely has better stats and I think is even more useful in terms of battle potential, I do actually like the design of Alan-Claw quite a bit. The original designs are quite good. I do think it's solid, but especially once you get to the high level design, it's got a very nice, clean approach to it. It uses orange to great effect, which I'm not usually a huge fan of orange on higher level creatures. I usually think the max design on orange is not my favorite color pairing. I don't really love orange in general, so maybe it's a personal bias, but generally speaking, I think this creature does a great job at that. It's got a cool crest. So yes, once again, this comes down to personal preference. If you keep Limnosceles higher than Alan-Claw on the list, I can totally understand that, but for me personally, this is where I'm keeping it. Now, if we were just considering stats and design, I think Diplocaulus would be actually a little bit lower on the list. Don't get me wrong, I don't dislike the design, but it is quite creepy with those gosh darn devil red eyes, but it's also got some cool colors, but it's just never really stuck out to me. The original design is quite cute, I will admit. It's quite cuddly, but overall, there's nothing too interesting in terms of its design. Again, it just kind of feels a bit forgettable like Guanlong. It just doesn't really have a place in terms of common creatures. Stats are good, 284 health and 73 attack. However, the one thing with the stats that is kind of unfortunate that Limnosceles suffers with as well, compared to other creatures, whenever you look at it, especially one other specific common amphibian, it actually cannot kill any one of the common carnivores in 2 hits, which is a big step up or misstep in my opinion. Especially whenever I'm doing common-only events, such as Fight for Food or Fight for Funds, and all those other common events that give you the coins pack and the food pack. I use commons a lot for those events, because those are the only times commons are required. And I always just forget that Diplocaulus is one of the creatures that cannot two-shot any carnivore, which really does bother me. So with that all being said, considering this creature is decently expensive, and it can still not two-shot carnivores, that might make it seem like I don't really like this guy. Why is he decently high up on the list? And the main reason is actually because of its hybrid. Its hybrid is one of the best, because Diplitator is not my favorite hybrid in the game. I don't love it. However, it is required. You must get Diplitator if you want to continue playing the game. There's a mission for it. You have to get it maxed out completely. So because of that, Diplocaulus is required, again, if you want to get decently high up in the game, so it's probably best to evolve this guy early on. So therefore, that's why I'm giving this guy a pass, because otherwise he's quite boring in my opinion, and the stats are not amazing for how much this guy costs and how much later you get him in the game compared to the other creatures. However, he does have some upsides, which is ultimately why he's slightly higher up on the list. Pelecanamimus is the final dinosaur, common dinosaur at the very least, that cannot be unlocked through any type of event or battle. However, it is much higher than both Jungosaurus and Coloborhynchus, mostly because this guy is very useful for a variety of things. First of all, if you couldn't already tell, his design is a huge step up above everything we've seen on this list. They really did go hard with this design. I love the colors, the green, the jade, the aqua blue. They really just give off this very tropical vibe that just gives us a very avian look, and I just absolutely adore it. I just always loved the design, and I was so impressed. I was just waiting to get this guy maxed out just for the design alone. But ultimately, above that, the main thing that puts this guy higher is a great hybrid, which is Pelecanipteryx, which is definitely probably the best common hybrid, maybe beside Alangosaurus, but it also is quite good for in terms of pterosaurs, which there aren't a lot of options for pterosaur hybrids in this game, so it is good that's one of them. And it also just has very good stats, 266 health and 83 attack. It actually does have decent attack, and it can actually two-shot all the pterosaurs, all the common pterosaurs at the very least. So it is actually a decent match for many of the creatures. Ultimately, though, again, it's not perfect. It really does suffer a little bit from not being able to get unlocked. But the design and the quite good stats do carry it a lot, in my opinion, which is why I've decided to keep it decently high up on the list. But Pelecanamimus's hybrid partner, Hatzegopteryx, is ultimately going to take it one step further in terms of the creature itself. Now, in terms of design, I don't love this one as much, but I do like it. I think it's a solid pterosaur. It's very big, and it really gets the point across. but there's not anything too special about it, just some nice little colors. I like the dark red. That is something unique to this creature, I feel like, but otherwise it's not something I think about all too often. The stats, though, are the second best, I believe, out of all of the creatures, all the common creatures, with 253 health and 97 attack, and it can be unlocked. It has to be unlocked through an event, the Earth-Shattering event. However, it's still pretty solid, so I do give this guy a pass. I do like this one quite a bit because of that, even though I'm not as fond of its design as Pelican and Midas. To wrap up the amphibians on the list, I'm putting Labyrinthodontia much farther than the other two, Diplocaulus and Limnosceles. This guy, in my opinion, is so much better. Starting off with the design, genuinely one of my favorite common designs, even probably up there with one of my favorite amphibian designs. The aqua blue is beautiful. It looks amazing on this guy, and the skin texturing is so much better than Limnosceles. It feels smooth and nice and just rendered in perfectly to make this guy really stand out, especially once you get him max. Again, another one that I've always loved the max design for. The stats are quite good as well, not as good as some of the other ones, but 236 health and 90 attack. The attack especially is useful in this case because he can two-shot any common carnivore, which is exactly what's required, and I'm a big fan of them being able to do that, and this is the only amphibian that's able to do exactly that. So all around, I'm a huge fan of this guy. It's also quite cheap. The hybrid is a good one. Labyrinthosaurus is not the absolute best, but it is quite good, so it is good that you can get all of this with just this one creature. All around, very well rounded. Moving into the top 5, we have the big bad Majungasaurus. This is the carnivore of the entire first part of the game. It is the first carnivore you get. You see it, especially in the prologue. It is one of the 2 creatures in the prologue, technically, and it has a legendary place in the game. We don't think about it much, but Majungasaurus truly did get us through a lot. However, whenever I thought about it for a little while, a little bit longer than I initially thought, I was going to put this guy much higher, honestly, even more than the top 5. I was going to put him in the top 3. However, the more I thought about it, he doesn't quite have that placement. You do have to get him to level 30. He is good, but ultimately the stats are not the best at 224 health and 86 attack. Doesn't have the best health. And once you do get out of there, that phase, it's not really like it has much else to it. But it does have a hybrid, Alangosaurus, which is quite possibly one of the best hybrids in the entire game, just because it is required once again, and it is the cheapest hybrid in the entire game. So there is that going to it, and I do like the design overall, but it just doesn't really stand out all that much. So yeah, Majungasaurus is good, really good even in the early game, but just kind of falls off a little bit once you get a Alangosaurus. I just don't really find myself using it. And in fact, I use other common creatures all the time. This is just not one of them. Ultimately, the stats are what hold it down. So I've decided to place it a little bit lower on the list, despite it being very useful. Argentinosaurus got quite lucky here, because if we were using the old 2015 or 2016 design, this guy would be dead last.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no.
Because that thing is ugly. Thankfully, though, the game developers decided to actually use their brain and realize that model sucked, and they decided to use this new one, which is much better. Regardless of what you think about the model change, though, I do actually really adore the maxed out design for how colorful it is, but also keeping it quite simple. This is a gentle giant of the common creatures, and therefore it does have a very special place. And the stats are actually quite good at 281 health and 72 attack, definitely boasting quite a bit of health, which is really nice to see, honestly. Argentinosaurus is also quite inexpensive at only 140 DNA, when it really should be close to 170, 180, like the other creatures that have similar stats, but thankfully this one is quite good. So overall, it basically has a place as the same hybrid as the last creature, Labyrinthosaurus, and it's all around very solid. Definitely have a soft spot for it, do like it a lot. Kicking off the top 3, these are starting to get into the really good creatures. We have Tropoganathus, and this is easily my favorite pterosaur. I do have some bias to it because I did level up very early on, max it out and everything. However, this creature is amazing. It has 260 health and 81 attack, and even though that's technically lower than Colobrinchus and Hatzegopteryx, I consider this one to be definitely stronger than Colobrinchus. It's very close, but I do think the health here is a little bit more preferable and does make this creature still very strong. Either way, it can two-shot all the common amphibians, so it doesn't really make a difference. The design has a super bony, tribal look to it, which I do really adore and I think is very unique to this creature. Colobrinchus has a similar design, but I think this is executed much better. This guy is cheap, he's affordable, it's very easy to get him. He's technically the first pterosaur you ever get, because you do unlock him in the first mystery pack that you actually open. all around, there's just nothing bad about this creature at all that I can possibly complain about. No downsides whatsoever. He's just awesome. So Tropoganathus goes high up on the list. The runner-up spot is actually the Utahraptor, and to be honest, I consider Utahraptor to be sort of the #1 as well. It's very complicated, but if you're just looking at the creatures in terms of stats and overall usability, Utahraptor is absolutely up there in just terms of battle. It's the most expensive common creature. However, you can still unlock it from an event, and you get the amazing stats at max of 259 health and 99 attack, nearly 100 attack. It also helps that Utahraptor is one of my favorite dinosaurs of all time. I actually prefer it to Velociraptor, so the design absolutely kicks butt. And while the max design definitely goes very all out, I do actually really love this max design as well. It has a lot of graffiti. It's got a very graffiti look to it, which I think is super unique. Overall, though, it does work for me, even though it's very weird. But the overall design, the actual stats, everything about it is amazing. It definitely is a champion, and it makes another one of my favorite hybrids of all time, which is the Spinoraptor, who is an awesome hybrid, especially for the design alone. This creature is quite good. I do like this one a lot, and the stats are incredible. Again, I would put it at #1, but there is definitely one creature that in terms of the grand scheme of everything in the game, I will definitely, no problem, have putting higher. And that creature, of course, you guys expected it. It's Triceratops. It is really hard to understate how incredible and useful the Triceratops is. There is just a wide variety of amazingness to this creature. Just in terms of a common creature, it's high up there. It's got good stats. 274 health and 70 attack is not the best, but it's actually far from the worst, surprisingly. It's the first creature you get. It's basically free from the get-go. You don't have to unlock it through anything, and it's the cheapest creature in the entire game with only costing 100 DNA. Has a great design that is very crazy and very out there, especially for people, you know, who first saw it. But honestly, it is very tame compared to other designs, which is what makes it so cool. But the actual Triceratops model, original model at the very least, is very similar to what a Triceratops should look like, and that is really cool. But ultimately, what puts this guy at the very, very top of the list is just how incredible useful he is as the game evolves. We never forget about Triceratops. He has a hybrid that's very useful in the middle game. However, more than that, he genuinely is so useful for missions. You can always pop a Triceratops in if you need to get a creature out there. He's free to speed up. You can always count on Triceratops if you have one of those annoying as crap missions to get 1,000,000, or more accurately, 30 to 40 common creatures, or whatever the game might throw at you. We've seen some crazy stuff, but Triceratops has always been there through and through to stick it out with us. So that is ultimately why Triceratops is there. It's easy to use, it's cheap, it's useful, stood the test of time and time again, and that is exactly why it's at the top of the list. And that basically wraps up my ranking of all 15 common creatures in Jurassic World game. Once again, make sure to leave your list down below. I definitely went very in-depth in this video. I tried to explain my thoughts as best as I could. But again, at the end of the day, these are just dinosaurs in a game, and they don't really have that much to differentiate each other except models and stuff. So at the end of the day, it is going to be very much down to personal bias. But let me know what you thought of this video. I did a showcase video a while back of every common creature, and I think I'm going to be doing the same with rares, because I have every rare creature max now. So I might do every rare creature max and then do a ranking again. So we'll see, depending on what you guys want to see. I hope you did enjoy this one quite a bit, because I enjoyed making it. And until then, I will see you all next time. This is Jurassic Insider signing out.